Yes, thank you, Amit, and thank you, Rob, for inviting us here. It's very exciting to be here in Hong Kong. I'd like to just follow up, see how many people have actually visited Israel in the audience? Okay, well, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the country, a little bit of background on the startup scene, and what we think is really unique about Israel from our perspective at Access Innovation. Well, Israel's a really tiny country. It's based in a pretty bad neighborhood, and a lot of the companies that are based in Israel are completely focused outside of Israel, and that's probably because of our lack of natural resources. Over the last 20 years, since I've been in Israel from the US, Israel has slowly become the startup nation. And if you look back about 7 years ago, the term Fintech wasn't even heard of in Israel. And now about 10% of the startups in Israel are Fintech. And they've used, and I'll get to this in a minute, different technologies that were developed in the military, in communications, in ad tech, to cross over into Fintech. But the reason why people are investing in Israel is because of the amount of money that has been invested and the amount of exits. In 2016, there were $10 billion of exits from Israeli startups, and over 200 multinationals have put their foot on the ground in Israel. Why is this? The most important part of this slide is really the most number of scientists and engineers. The technologies coming out of Israel are based on technology, and that's one of the reasons why people in the East are so interested in Israeli technologies. We have the most number of startups per capita, and that number is growing. When you think about what is really special about Israel, when you compare it to other startup centers, and many countries around the world are developing those startup countries, and we actually at Access have been active in about 10 different countries. Well, first of all, the market size. Because the market size is so tiny, all the startups from day one are focused on global. I just want to give you an anecdote from the Super Bowl. There was an advertisement for Rocket Mortgage during the Super Bowl. You press on your app and you get a mortgage. And somebody in Israel saw this advertisement and said, well, we have the same thing in Israel. And I'm thinking, to get a mortgage in Israel is about a 3-month process. But what he meant was, there's an Israeli company that developed that same technology for an international bank. So here, the technology was from Israel, but it's not even used in Israel. The tech companies in Israel mostly aim to be disruptive. A little bit later, I'm going to explain about the companies in Israel that want to change the world. And we're not mostly looking at clones that work in one country that could then be used in Israel. The companies in Israel are focused on trying to develop new technologies that could drive new products and services. And also, people in Israel are very willing to change what they're doing. Oftentimes, startups that you met a year ago who were in a completely different area, big data or ad tech, are suddenly in Fintech. And that is a reason why the market is changing and so successful, and that's part of the Israeli business attitude. We looked at the Israeli companies that were in Fintech and weighted the size of those companies in the different sectors, and the most successful companies that have raised the most amount of money have been in payments as well as trading and investing. And on the payment side, a little bit later after my presentation, you're going to be hearing from one of those companies that has actually raised over about $300 million. Now, the fintech sector in Israel has raised almost $2 billion, and this is all in the last 2 years. When you look at the top 10 Israeli companies in fintech that have raised over $1.5 billion, some of these names are probably not familiar to you. They're not familiar to you because they're mostly B2B. Israeli companies have not been that successful on B2C companies. Now, the companies in Israel that are on this list have very strong management teams, and because of the Israeli ecosystem, have gone through the process of starting a company and succeeding a number of times. If you look at the third company on the list, which is called Behalf presented to Sequoia, and on the basis of a PowerPoint presentation, received a $10 million investment. If you go to the bottom of the list, a company called Lemonade, which is now disrupting the insurance industry, they didn't even have a PowerPoint when they went to Sequoia and received their first investment. And this is based on the strength of the team and based on the strength of their technologies. And the last line, all with no local businesses. These companies are not active in Israel. People don't even know who they are, and that's quite interesting. These companies, you do know who they are. Okay, these are the world's largest banks. And there are other companies not on this list. They all have active involvement and engagement with Israeli companies, but have no sales in Israel. Their offices are R&D, and they're coming to Israel to come up with new technologies. PayPal, other companies are also putting feet on the ground, acquiring Israeli companies, investing in Israeli companies, because they see the future of innovation coming with new technologies. People are always asking, what is it that's so special about Israeli companies? Is it something that's, the Darwin approach? Is it the nature or is it the nurture? So what is it that's special about the Israeli companies? Again, we think there's a unique culture there. I think that there are a lot of people that have very successful companies that have served as role models. And most important, many of the Israelis who have started companies have failed. And they've moved on and they've just kept going, and it hasn't affected how they do business. And the last part, for those of you who haven't heard it, is a word called chutzpah. It's very hard to explain. I'll just give you an example from a meeting that we had about a year ago. We had a German company come to Israel, and they were meeting with this Israeli company. This Israeli company served cookies. There were white cookies and there were dark cookies. After the first half hour, the Israelis started eating the cookies. They started eating the white cookies. After an hour, the Germans start eating. He reaches for the dark cookies, and the Israeli guy at the meeting says, no, don't eat the white cookies, eat the dark cookies. And I start laughing. And here, this Israeli had never met this guy before, yet after 1 hour, he already knew what type of cookies he likes and when he should eat them. Now, really, the Israelis a lot of times know better than you do what you should be doing, and they're not shy about that. When people talk about an ecosystem, what does that really mean? Well, you see it a lot in Israel, but what it comes down to is there are people who have an idea for a product, and those product companies are then developed by angel investors, by accelerators, by VC funds. As those companies grow, they move up the chain. And as they grow, as they have exits, they come back, and those same people are supporting startups at the bottom of the chain. And this, I've seen this with a number of companies, and that has helped to develop the Israeli ecosystem. And some of these Israeli companies have now moved to other countries, and there are many Israeli companies operating in other centers around the world. Israel's a really small country, and a lot of it starts with the proximity of startups and people. And really, everybody has heard about this 8,200 unit in the army. Well, Israel is also a country that was created by people from all over the world. And people are used to working with people from different cultures from the first day. So there are teams that are working together who are thinking about what other people, how they react and where they operated in different parts of the world. Mostly all of the business is focused in one small city, which is less than a half hour away from each other, and people are very approachable. That there are very few class distinctions in Israel, and if you want to approach somebody, it's very easy to do that. And of course, there have been many companies that have succeeded, and many people that are happy to encourage the next round of entrepreneurs. What is it, the work that we do at Access? Well, we operate globally. We have conferences like this that bring together investors and startups. We work with some of the world's largest companies. We invest. We also act as an advisor. We've seen about 1,000 companies over the last 2 years, and about 40% of the companies that we've worked with have gone on to raise investment rounds in a year after we met them. And we've had events, as I said, in about 10 different countries. Some of the companies around the world that we've worked with that are looking to find startups that are going to change the world are here. We've worked closely, Visa as a sponsor for this event. We've worked closely with Visa Europe that came to Israel trying to find startups that could help them get to the next level. They were looking at some of their competitors, PayPal, MasterCard, and trying to figure out what is it they needed to do to disrupt their space. We looked before this conference at some of the startups that we know that we think are now at the Series A, Series A post-seed level that we think are going to have disruption, that are going to change the fintech world, and some of these companies are here. We also have a conference coming up in March, and I wanted to just give you a snapshot of last year's conference about the Israeli companies that haven't yet raised their Series B that weren't on the previous slide. We see companies, we had about 35 companies last year. The average amount of investment to date for those companies, and we call it a Series A in Israel, is about $1 to $2 million. And they're looking to raise about $2 million. And most of them have gone through accelerators. And the last part, change the world. These are companies that are not clones. These are companies that really want to do something very significant. I would invite you all to join us in March in Israel. Robin and the organizers are actually, we're cooperating with them and later this year in a few other places. And I thank you for listening. And I have a short video to give you a little bit of flavor about some of the Israeli companies that have actually disrupted some different industries.
You find seeds that can be programmed to become whatever you wish. You engineer them to have limitless creativity. You plant them in soil designed to nourish them. They yield fruits of endless new inventions.
Okay, thank you very much.